2008 is an extremely important year for what is euphemistically called the conflict. It is, as we know, an anniversary year. It's being cast as a celebration year, the celebration of the 60-year anniversary of the founding of the State of Israel. Now, I want to talk about why 2008 matters so much to the State of Israel. And ironically, it matters precisely because of the success of the strategy that I've been discussing here. Because for all of Israel's success in bringing Western lawmakers on side and pulling countries like Canada, along with the US doing the pulling, into this war on terror paradigm, there is a downside to all of this success. The Israeli government has become greatly concerned that the only thing that we ever hear about Israel has to do with the conflict: walls, missiles, bombings, embargoes. Now, politically and militarily, Israel's hyper-aggressive strategy appears to be working. You could certainly argue that it's working. But culturally, this strategy has been something of a killer for Israel, from Israel's perspective. And the reason for that is that a key part of the strategy has been casting Israel as a company, as a country that is constantly, in mortal danger. And if that is in fact the case, if Israel is constantly facing this existential threat, to use a phrase that we hear very often, then it's hardly a very nice place to spend a summer vacation. And then there's also a kind of a tone issue to the aggressiveness of this strategy, this unapologetic aggressiveness. Who wants to hang out with a warish, belligerent bully? Who wants to visit a country with the same personality as Dick Cheney? Now, this is serious because a great deal of Israel's economy and Israel's core identity relies on its ability to promise and deliver on safety and security, but also normalcy, the idea of normalcy. Now this, I would argue, really is Israel's promise. And to put it in marketing terms, which we're increasingly hearing from Israel itself, its brand identity. This functions on three distinct levels, this need for normalcy. One is just the obvious one, that a large part of Israel's economy does rely on recreational tourism. And that recreational tourism is also about building that indispensable sense of connection between Jews around the world and the State of Israel. So it's not just about the money in the tourism industry, it's about the connection that comes from those trips. And of course, since the Second Intifada, the Israeli tourism industry has taken some hits. It took another hit after the attack on Lebanon. Now, the other reason why it's so important to project the idea that Israel is not in a constant state of crisis, which is the opinion you would get if you just read the newspaper, it has to do with another part of Israel's economy, which is what I explore in the book, which is the homeland security sector. An ever-expanding part of Israel's economy now relies on marketing the idea that as the sort of vanguard of the global war on terror, Israel has the greatest amount of experience fighting the terrorist threat and has been marketing its expertise in this area: biometric identification cards, unmanned drones, racial profiling, you name it, to countries in Europe and North America. This is a booming business in the homeland security industry in Israel. Now, for this to sell, Israel actually has to be safe and normal. The sales pitch is, we are in a sea of enemies. We are in constant danger, and yet we're hanging out in cafes and having a good time. That's how good our security apparatus is. It is about selling that normalcy inside the bubble. the bubble has to hold so that Israel can turn around and say, look, by our expertise. So that's the second part of this, the importance of being able to project normalcy and the problem of actually succeeding in convincing the world that you are in a state of constant crisis. It's a bit of a paradox. Now, there's obviously something even deeper in Israel's core identity that relates to this theme, which is that the very founding of the State of Israel, the early Zionist arguments, relied on the idea that Jews were not safe, or at least not going to be safe forever in Europe, in North America, and around the world, and therefore needed this cocoon of safety that would be the Israeli state. So if that state is not able to deliver on the promise of safety, then it has a real problem. And that is, once again, the paradox for Israel. So it can succeed in enlisting every Western government in the world in backing up its siege in Gaza, its slow annexation of the West Bank. But if it can't simultaneously project an image of safety and normalcy, it will face both an economic crisis because of the loss of the tourism and homeland security business, but more importantly, an identity crisis and the inability to sell to diaspora Jews the promise of refuge, the promise of refuge. So with this in mind, the 60th birthday celebrations are in the process of launching a major PR offensive, one that is very explicitly and deliberately designed to recapture the romance, idealism, and passion of early Zionism. The idea is to project an image of Israel as this cocoon, this bubble of safety and security, despite the many enemies, despite the perception of crisis. The deeper strategy, I think, is to capitalize on a very real nostalgia in the Jewish community for a sort of pre-Intifada simplicity, a nostalgia really for ignorance, a desire to turn back the clock to a time before we know what we know now. So I think we need to really look hard at something that seems benign, this idea of celebrating the birthday. Because these celebrations, which seem on the surface to be about history, to be about remembering, are actually about active forgetting. They are about actively erasing the Nakba. And when we are pulled into these celebrations and we don't challenge them, then we are being complicit in this attempt to reassert a lie at a crucial time. Now, Israel as part of this, is very deliberately playing up the country as a cultural center for fiction, for film, as well as a delightful tourist destination. Now, we've already seen some of this with some new marketing campaigns like Hot Israel. Maxim magazine did a spread with the women of the IDF. And we've also, I'm sure some of you have been following these debates where Israel has managed to secure a position as the guest of honor at the Paris Book Fair, which I believe is happening right now, and at the Turin Book Fair, which is the most important literary festival in Italy, in May. And this is all sort of around the 60th anniversary birthday celebrations.